Now, I taught history for 16 years and I substituted it for 10. And I've read a lot of history through the years, and it's nowhere. Maine history textbooks do not have it. U.S. history textbooks that I have taught do not have it. It is not written anywhere. And it's becoming a thing where we've lost so much history that I have decided that it's time to start grasping as much as I can grab. And so one of the things I decided to grab was my family's history of being on the lighthouses. So I am the 10th grandchild of 19, and my mother was born on the lighthouse, and one of her brothers, and I'll be talking about that tonight, but we'll start with this. So this picture, as far as I know, was taken in the 1920s. And then is my grandmother on the far side holding her youngest, or then youngest son, Nellie Alley Urquhart. That's Millard Harris Urquhart Sr. The tall boy is Alan Urquhart. The little boy is Millard Jr. And the little boy in her hands, you can't tell, but it is a boy, is Adelma. This was taken on Seguin, and I'm starting with this because I'm going to be talking about these people and more of that family throughout this, because there's a plethora of information for you. So let me see if there was something else that I wanted to say before we move on. Yes. So when this picture is taken, my grandfather joined the Coast Guard very young. And at the time frame, the Coast Guard did not allow families to go with their loved ones. My grandparents already had the two boys. And so my grandfather and grandmother decided, we want to be together. They grew up poor, they'd lost their mothers, they'd grown up together. We want to be together, so he joined the Lighthouse Society. The Lighthouse Service, excuse me. He joined the Lighthouse Service, and he joins the Lighthouse Service, which was civilian. It wasn't part of the Coast Guard. But it was more money. And if there was room on the lighthouse, your families could go. If there was no room on the lighthouse, your families couldn't go. So they made it work. So there we go. You can go to the second one if you would, please. All right, this is Portland Head. And probably a lot of you have been to Portland Head. Forgive the fog, because every time I've ever been to Portland Head, it's always been foggy. Okay, so forgive the fog. That's about the best picture I've got of Portland Head. I have to say that I always thought my grandfather was stationed at Portland Head. That's what the family had always said. But some new history has come to me recently which disproves that point, that my grandfather trained at Portland Head. They were training all the lighthouse keepers at Portland Head. So this really is kind of like boot camp. This is where they trained them for every single thing that went on. And what did I want to say about Portland? George Washington commissioned it in 1787. It is one of the oldest in the United States. It's never been rebuilt. If you were paying attention to the storms 3 years ago when we had those horrific storms in January, there was massive damage at Portland Head, but it's all been repaired, thank God. Anything else? I'm going to be talking about the lenses. So if you look at the top of that tower, you can see where you see the glass at the top. I'm going to be talking about that. And when I talk about that, I'm going to be calling it the Fresnel lens, Fresnel. And there's a lot of information on that. Fresnel lenses go from size, the largest is 1 and the smallest is 5. And Portland Head was, it's been a while since I've done this, so forgive me for going to notes. Portland Head, I don't have it down. All right, yeah. So you can go to the next slide, and we'll be talking about lenses. That is Seguin. Now, those steps that you see right there, my grandfather poured them. That's the keeper's house. I stayed on Seguin. You can stay on lighthouses if you'd really like to go. And the closest one to you to go and stay on is Little River off Calais. So if you really want to go and spend the night on a lighthouse. No. Anyway, Seguin is a first order lens. So if you look right up inside that glass, you see that other, what looks like a prism? looks like a pointy piece up inside that glass. That's the Fresnel lens. So here's how the guy invented it. In the early 1900s, the country of France was getting bombarded with shipwrecks along the coastline. And kerosene lamps weren't working, and reflecting lamps weren't working, and nothing was working to give the people who were on the ships any kind of navigation. So a guy by the name of Fresnel, which I never pronounced it right, so forgive me, he came up with what we call the Fresnel lens, where you could put prisms together and bend the light and reflect it out. And depending on how many prisms you put inside your lens, that showed how far you could reflect out to the ocean. Some lighthouses have flashing lights. They'll flash. If you've been to West Quaddy, how many have been to West Quaddy? Okay, West Quaddy is a flashing light. Not all lights are flashing, but if they're a flashing light, they're a small lens. This one doesn't flash. So, let me tell you about the size of that light, because it's pretty interesting to know what these people did. That lens inside that tower is 101.97 inches tall. It weighs 12,787 pounds. It is 6 feet wide. There are 467 of these built worldwide, and the average weight of them, again, depends on the size of the lens. Now, before we go on, keep in mind that even though you're working for the civilians, they're going to come inspect everything. There can be no dust anywhere on any of that inside that lens. From the top outside to the bottom, and you'll clean it multiple times a day. We can see the next one. Now, before I talk about the tram, I want to explain that my grandfather was first at Ram Island. And I don't have a picture of Ram Island because I only learned that he was at Ram Island a couple of days ago. And I didn't have enough time to go slide it. Ram Island is like out in the water off Portland. It's at the head of the Kennebec, by Booth Bay actually. And it is water, and it is tough to get on. And if you can get on Ram, you're lucky in those days. And if you can't get on Ram, then it is what it is. Now, I haven't been able to find out yet whether or not Grant actually stayed on Ram, or if he stayed in Booth Bay possibly, and then went out to Ram. Hopefully he stayed in Booth Bay. But if he stayed in Booth Bay, he would have had to have gone out to Ram every day. And it didn't matter what the water was. So you have to get out to the light every day. Doesn't matter. Now this is the tram. And I want to talk about the tram because Seguin is the only lighthouse that has a tram. Seguin is 186 feet high up. So when you land, there's no mooring, there's no way for a boat to land at Seguin. There never has been a boat landing. They're going to build one this year. Imagine it. After all these years, they decided the people who possess it will take care of it. They're going to build one. In the old days, they decided they needed to build something to transport supplies from the bottom up. So they built this, and they put, the only way I think about it is your own roller coaster. Because it had carts that went up and down, and you used the lever to go back and forth. That seems pretty cool when you've got kids on a lighthouse and they've got their own ride up and down. And my grandmother was adamant. This is not a toy. This is not a toy. This is not a toy. But the kids bypassed her and just would ride up and down. The sad thing about this is that in 1945, by the time my grandfather was no longer there, there was the keeper who was on the light, his wife, their newborn baby, and the dog were in the car. The keeper's at the bottom. And they're going up. It lets go. The pulleys let go. That's a straight shot back. There is absolutely nothing to protect you. There's nothing, all right? He's yelling to her, jump. And she's yelling, I can't jump. And he's yelling, you've got to jump. And she's going, I can't jump. He goes, toss the baby. And she goes, I can't toss the baby. So here they are plunging back, and it will go directly down and they would crash, which is what did happen. all of a sudden she claims that she could see hands stretched out from the sky. And a calm feeling came over her, and she tossed the baby. When she tossed the baby went into the bushes beside the tram going down, never harmed the child. It was a little girl, she was never hurt. Not one scratch, nothing. The cat goes all the way to the bottom and crashes. It kills the dog, and it broke the lady's 2 legs. The tram is shut down. They take supplies up, but people will never ride it again. Next slide, please. There she is. So this is looking up in the lens at Seguin. Now, you're thinking, how did they put all that together? Well, they made all of these in France. They ship them by boat to the United States in pieces. They put them in barrels with horsehair and ship them across. Now when you get them in the States, you have to figure out how you're going to get them to the island. So, Seguin has no mooring. There is none. So they had to use a block and tackle to lift the barrels up to get it up on the island. Up to the island. And then they use, it's not soldering, it's like bolts, a special type of bolt that this guy invented, and they had to bolt them together. However, they didn't trust the Americans to do it right. So for every single lens that went in, they sent one of the French engineers over. And then he would go to the islands, wherever they were, and he would make sure that it all went together the right way, and that when the candle was lit, that it projected the way it's supposed to, because they couldn't trust America. So, I think I had something else about that. Hold on. Let me see. Now, the range of this lens is 21 miles. You can look, a ship at sea can see this 21 miles away. This is used as the beacon for Bath Iron Works. When Bath Iron Works goes down, and when Seguin goes down, because this Coast Guard doesn't handle them anymore. When Seguin goes down, when the bulb burns out, because now it's a bulb, but when the bulb burns out, BIW, even though they've got navigation on board, prefer to see that lens, and they can't see it. Now they can't see, the people at sea can't see anything on the inside. But the people who are working inside have to clean all of that multiple times a day. And what you're looking at in the center shows it should have been cleaned, but see, this is the people own it now, the people run it now, so it's not like it should be. That's all brass. Back when my grandfather was there, it would have had to have been spit shine all the time. Now you're not just cleaning it once a day. You're cleaning it multiple times a day. You're cleaning up on a ladder. You're using feather dusters. You're using pieces of cloth. You're using distilled water. And you're cleaning it because you have rocks, you have salt water coming up on it. You have whale oil residue inside of it. And you have just regular dust. And that can't exist because if those prisms are off, then it can throw a ship off at sea. So I think it's pretty neat that they did that. But what do I know? I wouldn't want to do it.
Is the light the bulb up above in the middle?
That would be where what actually that is part of where the focus of it going out. So it's going to be projected that way, but that's going to focus, and part of that also would have been back in the day, the weights would have been there.
Okay.
So, to keep your prisms going, think of a grandfather clock, and you know how that you pull it periodically, so you have to pull the weights periodically inside these prisms to make sure that they're all set, and then gravity will pull the weights back down. And then when the weights go back down, you'll do it again. During a storm, you'll be doing it more often. The weights at Seguin weigh over 160 pounds a piece. Now, I don't know if Grant did them all alone, or if Grant had assistant keepers do it when he became head keeper, or what the status of that is. But those guys, keepers, my grandfather went because of heart trouble. He's not the only keeper that I know of that died of heart trouble. It's very clear why. This is not the job for everybody, and you had no technology. So there she is. So if you don't clean her, they can't see. The next slide, please. All right. This is important to me. This is a survival, this desk, not necessarily the pictures of Seguin, but this desk, my grandfather salvaged it from a shipwreck off Seguin. And back then you could keep salvage. So there used to be a matching chair to it. They think the ship was bound for England. They saved the crew, but you were allowed to salvage stuff if you could salvage it. This stayed on Seguin for all the rest of the years. Then when he goes to Libby, which is off Machias, he floats it on a barge to Libby. Then it stays at Libby for the rest of those years. Then he floats it on a barge to Jonesport, takes it off at Jonesport, stays in the Yorkhead house, hands it over to one of the boys. One of my uncles had it forever and a day, and then when my uncle was dying, he said to me, he said, what are we going to do with the Yorkhead desk? I said, I'll take it. I don't know how old it is, but I know that it's been in the Yorkhead family at least 90 years. And it's the only, and so all Grandpa had to have done was, you had to just log it. You just had to let them know that you salvaged something, and they didn't care. That's the Yorkhead desk. Before I go on, I want to tell you the potato chip story, because I'm thinking this is good. There's no schooling on these lights. There's no place for your kids to go to school. Not in the time frame my grandfather was on, all right? There had been a school on Seguin, but a lot of the lights never had a lighthouse, never had a school at all. So your kids had to go ashore. If you wanted them to go to school, you had to teach them yourself. They rented a house on Popham Beach, which is where you would go out to Seguin. And my grandmother stayed with the 3 oldest kids. So she planted a garden on Popham of potatoes. And she said to my grandfather, there's going to be a need in this area. I bet I can sell potato chips. And he said, oh, I don't think so. She said, I bet I can sell potato chips. So she got the boys, because they were boys, all boys, the 3 oldest, slice up the potatoes, I'll bake them off, we'll season them, we'll bag them up, and I'll sell them around Bath. She had a thriving business. She couldn't keep them in stock. So my grandfather comes in from Seguin, and he says to her, hey, when am I going to see some of these potato chips on Seguin? I didn't ever get to taste it. And she goes, you can't eat up the profits. The next slide, please. All right, that's Libby. So, after decades of being on Ram, and being around Portland Head, and being on Seguin the Rock, they decide, or my grandmother probably decided, enough of this is enough. I want to get closer to Jonesport. Apply for something what's open. The only place that was open is Libby, and Libby is located off Machias. Actually, it's located off Starboard. People know where Machias Port is. You go right to the end, where Starboard is. You can go right out from Starboard and you'll see Libby. Okay? Libby is closed now. So my grandfather applies. Now, by now, they have 6 kids. They've had the 3 that you saw. Then they had the aunt who's 98. Then they had my mom on Seguin. My mother was born on Seguin. I'm going to talk about that. My mom was born on Seguin. They couldn't get her off. Graham off. And then her brother was born on Seguin. They couldn't get Graham off. So now you've got 6 kids. They were all on Seguin first. Not one broken bone. And Seguin is just a drop-off. You get to the edge. There's no fences. There's none of that. Never had a broken bone. Never lost a kid. She gets to Libby, and she says to my grandfather, what are we going to do with them when they go to school? Well, he said, here's what we'll do. You and I'll stay on Libby. They'll stay with family in Jonesport and go to school. Well, that's a pretty cool idea. So that's what they did, and my mother used to love it because my grandparents would come in either every weekend or the kids would go out. And in the summers, they were always on Libby. So now on Libby, and Libby is much smaller than Seguin, no broken bones. And they did that for 7 years until he got done in 45. When he lands at Libby, there used to be more buildings. Every building was in disarray. And they gave him the order to fix them. All of them. By himself. Because he's the only keeper. The only keeper. So he fixes them all. Next, please. All right. That's me, but you can ignore me. You've seen the movie Forrest Gump.
Yeah.
This is Marshall Point. Marshall Point Lighthouse is located in Port Clyde. All right? In the Forrest Gump movie, Forrest is running and running and running, and the last thing that he touches is a lighthouse door. He touches the lighthouse door at Marshall Point. So I had never been, and the first time I get there, these people are walking around, and I'm just looking at it, just in awe. And they're yelling, "Go touch the door! Go touch the door!" And I had no idea. And I'd seen Forrest Gump and it didn't click. So I'm running up and I'm going, "What am I touching the door for?" And they go, "Forrest Gump, Forrest Gump, don't you know, don't you know?" And that's what Marshall Point is known best for. Let's see. It is a 5th order lens. Lens is about 2.5 feet high, and it weighs about 1,000 pounds. If you're at Marshall Point, you skip down into Port Clyde itself, and you make an appointment ahead of time. You can go on a ferry, you can go up to Monhegan, where the writers go, the Wyeth family used to go. They go out, they paint, they write. Okay. It has a lighthouse. It has a 2-room schoolhouse. It's active. It's a large fishing community in the wintertime. If you go out on the ferry and stay for the day, you can eat out there, you can tour the island in a day and just enjoy. They will greet you because they love to have tourists come. So when the ferry's pulling up, they're all waving and welcome aboard and welcome to Monhegan. And when you leave and you're getting back on the ferry, they'll jump into the water and swim, and they will say, "Come again," and things will, confetti will go up in the air. It's really lovely. So if you ever have a chance and you want to do 2-in-1, I recommend that you go see Forrest Gump's door, and that you go down and take a ferry ride out and see Monhegan. It's really beautiful. Next slide, please. This is closer to home. So that's Little River. Now, the interesting thing about Little River is, a lot of people don't know, a guy by the name of Timmy Harrison. So Timmy and Kathleen Harrison lived in Cutler. And Timmy and Kathleen learned that Little River is in decay and they're going to lose it. So they make a concerted effort to go and see what they're going to do. They get volunteers, they get grant money, because there's a lot of grant money out there for lighthouses. They get grant money, and they continually go out, and they're working and working and working. Now, we've lost Timmy. Timmy died a few years ago. And Timmy and his wife ran this magazine, Lighthouse Digest. Okay? You can't get it anymore, because Kathleen's discontinued it, because she had nobody to help her to get it done. But this is probably the best lighthouse magazine. If you could go into the archives and read copies, you'll read about lighthouses not just in Maine. You'll read about lighthouses all over the United States. And you will read about lighthouses around the world, because Timmy did a lot of in-depth research. So they did all of this work on Little River, and then I decided I wanted to see Little River. I'd never seen it. I went to Calais Harbor. They were giving tours at Little River. Hopped on a boat. They took you out. Timmy met me. That was the first time I ever met Timmy. Timmy met me. We went up. I toured the house. When you go up into this tower, you have to be prepared to crawl out a window. Okay? And you're going to have to be prepared to crawl out windows for most of the towers. Seguin is different. Seguin has a door. But you're going to have to be prepared to crawl out a window. So Timmy said, "Bertha, go up in the tower. Tell me what you think. Come back down. Come back into the house and talk to Kathleen and I." So I did that. This was saved because of the efforts of Timmy Harrison and Kathleen Harrison. And with Timmy gone, that's one of the massive losses and lighthouse history on the East Coast. And we don't have a lot of them. Timmy was from Michigan. Came to Maine just on vacation, he and Kathleen, fell in love with Maine. Suddenly realized that there was a plethora of Maine history in lighthouses that nobody was talking about. And the rest is history. Came up to Lighthouse Digest, Historical Societies invited him all over the place. He wrote books, and then sadly we lost him. So if you get a chance, you can stay here. They offer the ability for you to go and stay. And I'm going to talk about who controls the river. But anyway, it's worth the sight. It's worth the trip. It's absolutely stunning, and it's an easy walk. They built a really good boardwalk, so when you get off the boat, you'll be able to get right onto the boardwalk and walk practically right to here. You'll have a little bit of a pathway. You can go up in the tower, but you don't necessarily have to go this up and go out. You can go in and take a look at the bottom and get back out. And then you can go in and take a tour of the light of that. And you're going to see all these rocks. There's a lot of them out there. They've got picnic tables set up like that one. You can go and eat, enjoy your day. And they're offering, I think, just overnights. I don't know if you can rent it for a weekend or not. Maybe. Okay, thank you. Oops, that's the wrong way. Okay. All right. Yeah, now, I picked this one because of how she looks. This is Egg Rock. And Egg Rock sits off our harbor. So, if you've ever done the sunset tour off our harbor, you'll see it. If you ever do a whale watch off Bar Harbor, you'll see it. Why did they call it Egg Rock? Well, they call it Egg Rock because of the fact it's got some ledge built onto it which attracts birds. And they lay eggs. And it happened with a lot of the lighthouses. So the local people would row out and collect the eggs. So there's a lot of egg rocks that just don't carry the name. That's the only one in the state that carries that name, Egg Rock. And I think they could probably clean it forever and a day, and I don't know that it would do any good because the birds are always there. You have gulls, you have terns, you have eiders, and they lay eggs. Whether or not people go and still collect them, I don't know. But they collected them for a long time then. Thank you. Thanks. All right. If you haven't been to West Quarter, you're not in Washington yet. But the reason that I took this picture is because I want you to look at the lens and I want you to look at the view. So when you look at West Quarter's lens, West Quarter is, let me get it right. She is a third order lens. And the cost for the lens in 1858 was $7,000. Okay, $7,000 when they shipped it all in and got it all put together. It cost $7,000. She flashes every 15 seconds. She flashes red. Okay. The interesting thing about West Quarter is it's the isolation, even though it's on land. Because think about when you drive down in there. Can you imagine getting down in there in the wintertime? And they're going to come with coal, and they're going to come with whale oil. And you're going to have to stock them both in supplies. And then if it snows and you can't get back out, they're not going to come fly you out. So you're going to have to survive with what you have. West Quarter is the only lighthouse in the state of Maine that has the red and white stripes. And nobody knows why. Because I've asked and asked and asked. And nobody knows why she has red stripes. But if you go into that, you no longer can tour her. I've toured her and been up in the tower and been in the lens. You can't do that anymore because they don't have anybody living at West Quarter anymore. But anyway, and when you're down there, you people realize there's another little building that kind of sits there. That's the fog house. Okay? And believe me, I'm going to talk about what the sound of the fog house sounds like when I say it on Squid. Next lens, next one. Now, that is Lubeck's channel light, and we call it bug light, and some people call it the spark plug, and there are only two of them in the state of Maine. There's this one and the one that's in South Portland. Okay? And South Portland's is by the breakwater, so if you've been in South Portland and you know where that breakwater is, and the breakwater means you've got a distance to walk out, that's what that is. Like Rockland has all these rocks, and you gotta walk over them to get out to the lighthouse. That's the rock on the breakwater. So the South Portland breakwater is the same way. Uneven rocks, big rocks that they brought in, so that you had to walk across them. You had to take all your supplies across those rocks. But back to the spat plug, nobody lives on these. Okay, there's no place for it to live. They call it the spat plug because of its shape. They're really a popular shape of lighthouse. There's a lot of them that have been built in the United States of America. And the reason that we have this one, it is a 5th order. It has a fixed red flashing light, a fixed light, so it doesn't flash. The keeper lived in Lubec. Now he would go out every day. Had to go out at least once a day. You have to cut the wick down because your candles burn down, so you gotta cut the wick down, you gotta clean the light, you gotta make sure there's enough whale oil to get you through. If it's a storm, gosh bless him, they left him a cot, and he has a cot that he can sleep on, and he has to stay overnight during a storm. And then he would go back. And it doesn't matter the weather, because if he's now the keeper at Spat Plug, he's gotta be out there every single day. Because somebody's got to check that light every single day. Whether he decides to stay in the cot, on the cot, or whether he decides to row out every day, he has no choice. Because that is one of the biggest shipping areas, or it used to be, one of the huge shipping areas down here. And you have to make sure somebody's there. There. All right, next, please. Thank you. Okay, that's Bass Harbor Light. Now, I only took a picture of the lens because Bass Harbor is a 4th order. And if you've gone to Bar Harbor, if you ever went off, you went to Southwest Harbor, Bass Harbor's through there, you can get out and see that light. It is one of the most popular lights in the state of Maine. Millions of people have come to see this light. Why? Because it's right by Bar Harbor, okay? And it's on land. So all they have to do is get in their cars and just drive. They don't ever have to get out on a boat, and they can take a look at it and get all the pictures that they want, and then scoot away and say, oh, look at me, I've been to the lighthouse. And the ones you're gonna see pop up a lot of times is Bass Harbor. Bass Harbor is now Coast Guard housing in the house, and the tower is closed. I've never been able to get in Bass. The interesting thing about Bass, if you go to Bass, they've got a neat little walking lane to the side, once you wouldn't park, and you can walk down behind it and get a view of it that way. And there's some steps that will take you down if you want to go and do that. I suggest you take a walking stick if you do that, but it's really a pretty view. It's absolutely stunning. So, next, please and thank you. All right, that's me again. Forget me. I just like to have my picture taken when I was doing all this. This is West Quaddy, but the reason that I want to show this is notice the red steps. Okay, only lighthouse in the state of Maine that's red and white stripes and red steps. And nobody knows why. Now, legend has it that the reason that it's red steps is because they wanted the keeper to be able to find the steps when he went inside the tower, no matter what the weather was. I don't know. But she's the only one. And I want you to notice they wind up. Now, I want you to envision me carrying about 7 pounds of whale oil in a container. And you're taking 2 up. And you're going to walk up, depending on how many steps. It's like 94 steps to the top of Seguin, okay? You're going to walk up that because you're going to walk multiple times to pack in your whale oil at the top to fill the wick, all right, to fill the candle. And then you're going to have to take all the empty containers back down. And you're going to do that multiple times a day. So if you didn't build some stamina in the legs, you should never be a keeper. But you can't get into this. You can go, I don't know if they even allow you in this fair anymore. Oh well. Anyway, you don't want to look at me, so you... Oh, yes, you do want to look at me one more time. Sorry about that. Nubble. All right. This is your postcard. This is the one you see on postcards. This is the one that's lit up in July. This is the one that everybody goes, oh my, look at that. I've been to Cape Nettic, or I've been to Nubble. They call it Nubble because of the rocks. When the keepers lived on the light, there is no way to get a boat to get on the light, okay? You can't get off a boat at Nubble and climb. They developed a cable car. So they had a cable car that had ropes, and it was in the park, Sofa Park, and you got into the cable car and you pulled yourself to the other side, and then when you get whatever you need, you pull yourself back to the other side. So the keepers' kids pulled themselves over. Somebody pulled them over every day to go to school, and then they pulled them back to get them back. And when one of the early keepers was living there, she was 8 months pregnant, and she wanted to get off the light. And her husband couldn't get her off because he was busy controlling the light. So she got in the cable car at 8 months pregnant, and she pulled herself to the mainland, and the next day she had the baby, and 2 days later, she and the baby were back on the light because she was the assistant keeper. She didn't get paid for it, but she was the assistant keeper. So I can't envision what that took in the arms. Okay? You're talking some arm strength. I mean, I have no idea. But I took that one because I don't know that I will ever get back down to York. Nubble is a, no, I don't know what type of lunch she is. Don't forgive me for that. So the next one, please. Prospect Harbor. Okay, this is an interesting one. I consider the white thing that you see, the golf ball, that's what I call it, but it's not really that. How many people have been, have any of you been, you've been in Prospect, right? Okay. You can't get near that light. You can go a ways, and then you're going to have to stop because it's going to say restricted area. It is the only lighthouse in the United States of America that was ever controlled by the U.S. Navy. And the U.S. Navy took it over in 1934. And you're going to think to yourself, that's really odd because the Coast Guard had all the lights. You're right. The Coast Guard did have all the lights, but the Navy had all the communications. That area has the best underwater ability for communications, like Cutler with Cutler's radar, the best underwater communications on the East Coast. So when they got ready to build Prospect, they said, looking, because it's Cold War time, and they want connections to Russia. All my research shows is that in those days of the Cold War, whomever we had for Navy guys there, they could hear the jets take off and land in Russia. They knew which jets were in the air, they knew which jets were on the ground. And it has to do with the underwater currents in that area. And the only place that exists is there and Cutler, because we have the best radar on the East Coast. So, now, the Navy turned it over to Space Force. And Space Force controls it. I know. Y'all thinking the same thing I am. What do they do? Well, research shows me that the little golf ball that I've always thought covered the communication center, it does. It covers the best satellite dish that we have in the United States. And Space Force, with that dish, is controlling, can see every single satellite that's up there. Now, whether or not there is tapped in to Russia's communications using what's underwater, I don't know. I'm sure they are. But now they're controlling the skies. Back in the day, we were controlling what was underwater and what they could hear that way. They were controlling sonar. And all of the, my research shows that all of the subs that we were putting off Cutler were getting their directions not only from Cutler, but directions were coming from here, from the Navy, and telling them where to go and what was in the area. And they knew where the Russian subs were, because Russian subs are always off that coast. So, you can't see the dish. And one of the reasons you can't see the dish is just they don't want you to know which way it's turned. They don't want anybody to have any idea what direction anybody's looking. And so you're not going to get very far. Now, part of that, the upper story of that keeper's house burned about 6 years ago. And they weren't going to repair it. Prospect Harbor said they weren't going to repair it, they're going to let it go. And then Prospect Harbor said, this is the reason people come. They come to Prospect Harbor to see the lighthouse, because they've got a miniature one in the middle of town. They come to see the lighthouse, so they repaired it, because Prospect Harbor didn't want to lose it. But if you want to talk communications and you want to know anything on Space Force only controls one lighthouse in the United States of America. Space Force controls that one. And I find that extremely interesting. And you know, I've got friends who were involved in lighthouse history who have been able to get close to the backside on a boat and been stopped every time when the Navy controlled it. The Navy would not let them in. They had restricted waterway of how far you could go. I don't know. Who knows? All right, next, please. All right, this is part of my heart. About 18 years ago, no, about 15 years ago, I got a phone call one night, late night, from Louisiana. And I don't usually pick up people's calls, I don't know. So I picked it up, because I'd been substituting school that day. I was tired. I thought, oh, it must be a spam call. I mean, who's calling me from Louisiana? And it was a woman by the name of Seamond Roberts. Seamond Roberts said to me, "Are you Bertha Caler?" I said, "I am." She said, "Hi, I'm Seamond Roberts. I'm a lighthouse keeper's daughter from Massachusetts, who was in the Coast Guard and now lives in Louisiana. You've been posting on lighthouse groups about the Urquhart family." I have. I sent you a friend request on Facebook. We must get to know each other. The infinite amount of knowledge that woman had would astound you. She grew up in the Depression times on the lighthouses in Massachusetts with her mother and father. Okay? So, this deals with the Flying Santa, and you're going to wonder what that is. My mother would always say, you know, you'll never know what it's like to have a Christmas present from the Flying Santa. And I would say, well, I don't know what the Flying Santa is, Mom. And she would go, well, it's this really neat plane that flies over the lighthouses and flies over the outer islands and drops packages to all the kids that live on the lights and all the outer islands. And I said, oh, come on. And she said, no. And she said, best candy? She said, your grandmother can make candy like wildfire. The best candy comes from the Flying Santa. So Seamond was living, she was small, she was living on a lighthouse with her parents. And Edward Snow, the guy's name is Edward Snow. And Edward Snow started what he called the Flying Santa. And he got a plane in Massachusetts, and he would get these presents together, find out how many kids were on a light, on the outer islands, and he would just go drop them. Dress as Santa and go drop them. At no cost. It cost none of them anything. He just appeared out of the blue. So, Seamond's on the light, and he drops packages, and one of the packages he dropped was a doll. But the doll went onto the rocks, and it broke. So her father said to her, you know, I can fix that. We can kind of like bandage her up, you know. So Seamond had her all those years, all that time. And Seamond kept saying to her mother, you know, I wish the Flying Santa could bring me a different doll. And mother goes, no, we don't ask for things like that. You're very lucky that you have this one, even though, you know, his face is a little smashed, this and that. You're perfectly fine, because there's a lot of other little girls that don't have anything. They moved. Her father got transferred. So she kept saying to her mother, you know, the Flying Santa's not going to find us. And mother goes, oh, he is. Don't worry. Santa knows where everybody is. Whether it's the Flying Santa or the Santa coming in the sleigh, he knows where everybody is. The short version of the story is, they move, Christmas arrives. Her mother tells her to get her best dress clothes on, they're going to see somebody. And when they go, the plane lands, and it's Edward Snow. And he presents her a brand new doll. Her mother had written a letter to him and said, you know, my little girl was on the light, and the doll broke, and I'm wondering whether or not she could get a replacement next year. And he bought it for that Christmas. On top of that, he said to Seamond, who was only like knee-high to a grasshopper, do you want to be my elf for the day? And Seamond said, well, I'd love to. So they pop her into the plane, and she and Edward Snow go and deliver all the packages all day. She gets to toss some of them out. This book is about that. It's written for children, okay? But it's a true story. And her name as you can see, Seamond and the Flying Santa, it's about Seamond Roberts. And if you want something cute to read to kids or to just read and smile, I brought my copy, which is autographed by her decades ago. Here's what she did with the money. For every book they sold, because you can get this on Amazon, for every book they sold, she donated all of the profits to the Flying Santa. Now Edward Snow is long gone. She donated profits up until she died, and she died when she was 82. She's been gone 3 years. She died when she was 82, and she said, Bertha, I will always donate to the Flying Santa. Now there's nobody on the other islands anymore. I mean, nobody on the lighthouses anymore. But the Flying Santa still goes to the other islands. And there's a website called the Flying Santa. There's a Facebook page. It pops up every year, and you can go and read about it. And it's really worth the read. And while I'm on Seamond, when we lost Seamond, we lost another big piece of lighthouse history. Seamond said, Bertha, I think I've told everybody every single lighthouse story that I know for like 5,000 times. My kids are tired of hearing it from them. My husband's tired of hearing them. My friends are tired of hearing them. But you're newborn. So she started telling me the stuff that she said, I finally put a book together. And I said, well, God bless you. She said, what? She said, I'd written all the stuff down, and I said to my kids, one of the kids is gone, she said, I said to my kids, if I write it down, I want you to read it. I don't know if you've ever listened to me all these years, but I want you to read the book. And they said, if you put it together, Mom, and you get it published, Mom, we'll read the book. When she died, before she died, we had to talk about Everyday Heroes. She said, Bertha, I don't think any of the three of them have read it. All the donations, all the people who bought this, that donations also went to the Flying Santa. She kept none of it. And the guy who convinced her to finally put it down on paper is a guy by the name of Jeremy, I'm going to mess his name up. I think it's called Detremont. He is a historian in New Hampshire. And he kept reading everything about her on Facebook, and he said, Simone, you gotta put it in a book. And she said, I don't know anything about a book. He said, well, write it down, get me the pictures, because there are pictures in here, and I'll put it together. And they came up with Everyday Heroes, and it's worth the read. You can get it on Amazon, but I'm sure that you can get it on the Libby app or something. So I would recommend that. She was an amazing lady. So we have lost in the Northeast and in the Southwest, we have lost Seamond Roberts, and we have lost Timmy Harrison. And we are really hurting on people for lighthouse history. Next one. That's Grant. And that's the catwalk. And so there's a little circle. You can circle that tower at Seguin. There's a guy beside him. We cut him out. We did that because he's one of the inspectors. They never knew when the inspectors were coming. The inspectors could come day, night, any hour of the day, and they had the white glove test. Outside, inside, everything had to be spit shine. Even their dustpans were brass. You had to shine everything. My mother said, I never got so tired in my life as your grandmother would line us up in chairs, hand us a piece to shine, hand us some brass polish and say, get back to me when you think you're done and I'll inspect it and see whether or not we think it will pass for your grandfather's next inspection. If you got written up, you stood to lose your job. In all the years that Grandpa was in, he never got written up. So, but think about it. I mean, they even put the kids to work because you've got all this brass all over the place. You've got windows, and I'm talking about places you wouldn't think they would look up over the tops of doors. In the very corners, they would get down with the white gloves, and if there was anything, and I mean anything, they would write you up in a heartbeat. When he was on Libby, he made the most money he made in all the years he was in. And he made $1,560 a year. And by the time he's on Libby, they've got 6 kids, and she's expecting the 7th. And that's all they had. And that's not a lot to get by. I mean, don't get me wrong. It was war years, because that's World War II was going on. things are what they are. But they found people who were willing to do this job during the Depression years because people didn't have jobs. And that's where you found a lot of your keepers during the Depression years because guys didn't have jobs. And suddenly this opens up and anyway. So there he is. Smiling, I think he was a handsome man, but I'm a little bit prejudiced. Next one, please. Seguin at night. Now, Seguin burned originally and they rebuilt her. So that date is for the rebuild. She's absolutely stunning inside. They let me go in because I'm the granddaughter of a keeper. Ordinarily, they will not let you up as far as I went. I went inside the lens. They don't ordinarily let anybody up that far. And they let me out on the catwalk, which is where Grandpa has to circle around the top. This is the keeper's house. This side now of the keeper's house is a museum. The side that you can't see, yeah, you can see, yeah, you can. Yeah, because that was my room. This side is the museum side, the other side is the keeper's, where they have keepers in the summertime. By the way, if you'd like to apply for a job, Seguin looks for keepers every summer. You can go out and stay. The requirements are relatively simple. You have to do all the mowing, and they request a garden usually. You have to make sure that the foghorn's going. You don't have to worry about cleaning the light the way they clean the light. It took 5 days to clean her entirely. 5 days to clean Seguin. And then you start all over again. And he did that for 10 years. He was on Seguin 10 years. Working his way up to the head keeper. 10 years, and you do it every 5 days. And it has to be spit shine. And you have to, and you can't wear gloves because you can't get anything on prisms. Can't leave fingerprints. Can't leave smudges. Those prisms have to be clear because the mariners at sea are depending on it. And if they see a smudge, it throws them off. And while I was there in 2014. I'm the only grandchild to be on the light. When I was there in 2014, Seguin had been down. She'd been offline for, I don't know, a month and a half. The Coast Guard had tons and tons of calls from BIW. When are you going to bring Seguin back up? Well, the Coast Guard doesn't control them anymore. So the Coast Guard goes when the Coast Guard feels like it. And all they're going to do now is replace the bulb. The bulb in here is 1,000 watts. But that's all they're doing now. And if they don't feel like going out to Seguin, they're not going to go. And just before I went, they had been to Seguin and got it back up, and they had been notified by BIW, the ships at BIW, thank you, Seguin's back online. Now, I don't know about you, but I can't envision living there, no electricity. Ships can and cannot, sometimes ships can get in and sometimes ships can't. You're there for an inordinate amount of time. You've got all those kids, and I think Gramp and Graham may be one of the few sets to keep, one of the keepers who had 6 kids, because I think that's a rarity. I haven't found anything to disprove that yet, but I'm still searching. You have to rely on yourself, and you can't get a doctor. You can't get your stroller and go shopping. If you can't make it, or grow it, or feed it, and then kill it, you can't have it. Because you're just not going to get to shore all the time to pick all those necessities that you want. So, I can't envision doing that, but there are thousands of keepers who did that. And the reason, Maine has 65 active lights. Wow. We have the most lights in the United States. We have 3,200 plus miles of shoreline. And they place lights where there are shipwrecks. That's how they picked them. So the Coast Guard did studies, and if they saw an area that had a lot of shipwrecks, they investigate and then decide this is a perfect place for a lighthouse. Now, does that mean it's a great place for people to live? No, doesn't mean anything. But it means the lighthouse has to go there, and then you've got to find the staff to man it, and then do, so that's really what they did. So 5 days to clean up. Last one, please. That's my mother. My mother was born June the 30th, so this is a really good time for me to come, because I'm doing this also in her memory. My mother was born on Seguin. She is the second to last girl born on Seguin. She was born June the 30th, 1932. It was a raging storm. They could not get my grandmother off. But one of my grandmother's sister-in-laws was on the light. Well, you'd have to have somebody, because my grandfather was running the light. So he certainly can't run all the kids and deliver a baby. So my great aunt had gone out. The birth certificate could not say that she was born on Seguin. You had up to 14 days to get ashore, to get to the very nearest town and put the birth certificate in. So the nearest town was Phippsburg. So Mom's birth certificate says Phippsburg, but Mom was born on the light. And this dress that she's wearing, my grandmother made. So she's about, she can't be more than 1 or 2 there. But anyway, it's old. I'm going to have it cleaned up as best I can and frame it. It's come into my hands recently from somebody inside the family. But and Grandpa stuck a bow in her hair, and my mother couldn't have liked that, I'm quite sure. I never really thought about that. So women became jack of all trades. They knew how to run the light, like the lady on Nubble. Graham probably knew a significant amount of stuff on the light she was with Graham. You take care of the kids, you do this, you do that. You're busy all day from the time you get up until the time you go to bed. That's an awful lot of work for $1,560 with normally. But if he hadn't loved it, he wouldn't have stayed. And there's something about it that he decided to stay. In 1939, the Coast Guard engulfs the Lighthouse service. They take it all back under their control. Graham had gone in as a Coast Guard person, had switched over to the Lighthouse service so Graham and the kids could be with him, and in 39 goes back into the Coast Guard and finishes out because the Coast Guard's taking it back over. He finishes out as a Coast Guardsman, which in his estimation would probably have been the best thing. He had 3 brothers who were also lighthouse keepers. And they, and it's a small community. See, Mom would say to me, it's a really small community. Every keeper knows the keepers in his or her area, because women were keepers too. They know those keepers. And everybody is aware of whatever when it comes to those keepers. But those keepers are also aware of keepers in another state, and then in another state. And the community, even though there's a lot of lighthouses in Maine, the community is small. One of my uncles carried the middle name of a keeper here in Maine. So, it is that important. So that's my slideshow. I want to show you, I brought down some books. I don't know what you people might be interested in. If you've never heard of Connie Small, you should read Connie Small, The Lighthouse Keeper's Wife. I left contact information and a list of books with the Historical Society. I love this book. I love The Lighthouse Companion in Maine because it gives you directions to the light. And don't get me wrong, I know GPS exists today, but I'm not a GPS person, I don't use it. But it also gives you like the longitude and latitude kind of stuff, and it gives you a little bit of history, and it also gives you the pictures, and I think that's kind of cool. Then Lighthouses in Maine, if you're just looking for a book that's got really pretty pictures, the Lighthouses in Maine does a really neat job. They'll give you a little bit of history, but they'll give you a lot of not a lot of information, but really pretty pictures to look at. Because let's face it, when you think of a lighthouse, what do you think of? You think of somebody going and having the picture taken, and they're saying to themselves, right, they're saying on Facebook, look at me, I've been to wherever. They have no idea what those people did, okay? My goal with this history is for people to know what those people did. And to know that the next time you see a lighthouse, you think to yourself, gosh, that's really pretty, because they are. But you also think to yourself, oh, that's right. That lady, when I went and listened to her, wanted me to remember that people actually lived there, people died there, and they made it all work. And then, Seguin is more than 200 years old. Seguin was established in 1795, and they put out a little pamphlet about Seguin's history for 1995. And in 1995, a lot of my family went to the light for the 200th. It was a really, really big deal. The 250th is coming up in a few years. I don't know that I'll be on Seguin, let alone be here at all, but we'll see. But there's a lot that you can see. I brought something that might interest you. I don't know how many of you travel, but, my Lord, all right. You can get passports. You can get a Lighthouse passport. You can buy them at any card shop, any gift shop in a Lighthouse. Probably at other places you can buy them online. When you go to whatever lighthouse you go, including West Quaddy, they will stamp it for you. Okay? And it becomes your proof that you've been with us. So Seguin's is on here. All right? I filled up one. I'm on my second one. I haven't been to Lighthouses in a while because, quite frankly, I went to Bass Harbor a couple of years ago. It's hard to get a Bass Harbor light. I haven't hunted it down stamp. But they've all got unique things that you can just collect. Every single gift shop's got something. Ordinarily, this would be on my head. And as you can see, it's had a lot of wear and tear. It says Seguin Island Lighthouse Station because that's what it was and what it is. This hat is 12 years old. I wear it everywhere. It's traveled everywhere. It's been in Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Louisiana, and back, in Canada and back, and it keeps on going. It used to be Lighthouse, it used to be Coast Guard Blue, but it's not Coast Guard Blue anymore. Hopefully you've learned something tonight that you might make you think differently about light. And while I've talked incessantly about the family, that's what I know is my family. But I think it's really important to know that there were a lot of amazing men and women who did this job. And they never stopped to think, they just did this job. And they went on every day like it was a day of, every day they did the same thing. And when my grandmother got off the lights, she said, I'm never going back. And she didn't. But she cleaned house like she was on the lights. Okay? And everything was spit shine. And every night in a house that had 11 rooms, when they lived in Jonesport until they died, she washed, up until she was in the 70s, she washed every floor every night by hand. Because that's what she'd done. So, I thank you. Do anybody have any questions? Well, she's got contact information. Yes?
I was just wondering, is anybody buried on any of those islands? With the
I'm sure there are.
Yeah, but you don't
Because
know.
if you had,
I was thinking.
there aren't cemeteries per se that I know of.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't envision that the loss of a child or the loss of a keeper didn't require them to put them in the ground because you couldn't necessarily get them ashore.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's a good question, but I would think so. But then again, we've got a lot of people buried a lot of places, so I wouldn't think that lighthouses would be any different. Yeah.
So with the weights attached to the lenses,
Yeah.
did
I'm just gonna sit if you don't mind.
yeah sure did they rotate at all or was
They
it
do.
just-
So you're gonna pull them down, and the prisms are gonna go around.
Okay.
All right, and then gravity is gonna pull those weights back down to the bottom, and then you're gonna have to climb back up to the top and pull them back up, just like you do with a grandfather's clock. And you're gonna do that. My research shows that Grant probably did it in a storm as much as 3 times.
Is any of them automated? I mean,
They're all automated
they're all
now.
automated. That's
They're
what I was-
all automated now.
Yeah.
Well, the Coast Guard decided that it was tired, and that's right, I left that out. The Coast Guard decided that they didn't want to do it anymore. It was expensive, they didn't want keepers anymore, they went to automation. So if you were a group that wanted to pick them up, you could pick them up. If you didn't pick up the lighthouse in your area, then it could go into decay, and a lot of them have.
Yeah.
And if you didn't pick it up, or you did pick it up and you couldn't hold it, what we have in the state of Maine, it's the only one that I know of, is called the American Federation of Lighthouses. It's an organization that is Coast Guard run, but it's a It's supposed to be nonprofit, I don't know. I know the guy who runs it. They control 28 lighthouses here in the state of Maine. One of them they control is West Quarry. There is no organization that controls West Quarry. The American Federation of Lighthouses controls it. They also control Little River. And there's a lot that they've taken over. They control Owl's Head, they control, tons of them. Because the organizations can't hold them, they don't have enough manpower, volunteers, and the organizations can't hold them, so they deed them over to the American Federation of Lighthouses. The American Federation of Lighthouses will find volunteers to come in, clean them up, and they hold them. Because they said in Maine, not on our watch, we will not lose lighthouses on our watch. So they've got 28. Now, with Seguin, I don't like the organization currently that's controlling Seguin. Basically because they're about, look at me and look what we've accomplished. And that's great that they're accomplishing things. But you see, all the lighthouses in Maine have forgotten to keep us. When you walk into any lighthouse, and even at Quad, you're only going to see a plaque. You might see a few items. You might see a lantern. You might see a hat. You might see something, but you're not going to see in-depth information because it's not there. I started hunting up to try to find places that's got lighthouse information. Believe it or not, my grandfather's personnel file sits in Missouri. I'm going to file a form that I've researched. If I file it, provide his proof of death that I'm next of kin, I probably can get it. It'll take time.
Did he die there or something?
He died in '86, but you see,
No.
no. But he was out in 45. But I didn't know, see, until you start digging, you don't know what you can and you cannot get. I didn't know that I could get his personnel file. I'm told that I can get it. It's a process, it takes time, but whatever they've got, including any commendations he got, will be released to me. I'll know pay stubs, that kind of thing, anything. And, gosh bless the the Coast Guard, when they gave them up, they tried to figure out how to get the lenses off. Now, the lenses are all sealed together on those lights. So how are you going to get them off? Well, what the Coast Guard did was they thought it was a security issue. And if they left them and somebody figured everything out, it might be a national security risk. They smashed a lot of them on the rocks and destroyed them. So then when it came to the log books, because see, every single thing that happens on any of those lights, those men and women had to log it. Well, the Coast Guard decided now that too is a security risk. Because they may have written something that we don't want the average citizen to know, and they trashed and burned a lot of them. All of that history's gone. Now, is all of Seguin's gone? I don't know. I think all of Libby's is gone because it's closed light. So you've got this infinite amount of lights, history, that has been destroyed by the Coast Guard because one, they didn't know what to do with it, and two, they didn't want to hold on to it because they'd done it for all those years. They wanted to give it up. So when they decided to give it up, it's all going to be a security risk and we're going to get rid of it. And they destroyed tons and tons of it and never thought twice. Then you could talk to the Coast Guard until you blew in the face and they would tell you it was a decision made at the top and it's for the good of America and we gave it up. But if you talk to the individual families who are survivors of the, their families lived on the lights or they lived on the lights, they're going to tell you that's a lame excuse to destroy all of that history and then look up and tell the families, well, it is what it is, and you just can't access it anymore. And that's a sad thing. So I'm going to try to get Gramps, there's a Gramps personnel file. In Maryland, I don't have the information, but in Maryland, they possess the logs. So any surviving logs are in Maryland. Now I don't know exactly where in Maryland. I think they're in Baltimore, but I'm not sure. They could be in Annapolis. But they're there, and I'm going to apply whatever forms I need there to see whether or not I can access anything that exists on Seguin. And whether anything existed when he was on Ram, and whether anything existed when he was on Libby. And if I get them, then I'll be grateful. I have to pay for it. I don't mind paying for it if I can get it, because it would be in his handwriting. And that would be worth $1 million to me if I could get it. So, you know, we're at a point in history where you have to jump through a plethora of hoops in order to find information. And she told me how she got involved was she looked for information online, it wasn't there. So she winds up here, okay? That's becoming the norm. You go to look for something online and you can't find anything. You know it occurred. Somebody in your circle knows it occurred, but you can't find anything. It's because nobody's writing it down. My grandparents didn't write any of that down. My mother didn't write any of that down. They lived it. And they couldn't, and they talked about it, but they didn't see any reason to write it down. So I've left a ton of information here that you are welcome to, you know, access to the St. Croix Historical Society. I thank you all for coming. I truly, this warms my heart that people are interested. And if you know of any, if you know of anybody in any organization, locally, somewhere in the state, that's interested in Lighthouse history, reach out to this organization. They've got my contact information, and please pass it along. I would be willing to go and talk about lights. It doesn't necessarily have to be the Historical Society. And one last thing, there's nothing in textbooks. Anyway, like I said, I'm going to create a unit on lighthouses. I'm going to develop it this summer. I'm going to align it with the standards. I'm going to take it and peddle it. I'm going to be a salesman and peddle it to superintendents that I know, see if I can get it piloted in an 8th grade classroom for Maine history, because that's what it is. Not alone U.S., but Maine, but I'm going to focus on Maine, and see whether or not they will let it be piloted, and I get the feedback. And if I get the feedback that I think that I might get, then I want to contact Augusta and see whether Augusta is interested in anybody doing anything with Lighthouse history, and see whether or not we can even get a snippet inside of a Maine history book, because it's not there. There's nothing there. So I thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you, yeah.
Very nice.